Well, it's a log jam going on in the National League playoff picture right now, but the Brewers, oddly, look pretty solid.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. As you can tell, you can call me Sully. I've been a baseball podcaster for well over a decade now. This is my sixth full season here hosting Locked On MLB on the Locked On Podcast Network. And if you can't get enough of your pal Sully, I'm also the host of Locked On A's this year. That's right. I'm doing double duty here as the host of Locked On MLB and the host of Locked On A's. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever it's called now on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Today's episode is brought to you by SupplyHouse.com. It's a reliable way to get parts fast. Shop for your next plumbing, h-vac, or electrical job, easy for you to say, and get fast shipping from coast to coast at SupplyHouse.com. And if you're going from coast to coast, you may want to stop in the city of Milwaukee, home of the Milwaukee Brewers, and Chuck Freimund is there from Locked On Brewers. Welcome back to the show, buddy.
Hey, great to be a part of this. I wish the Brewers were playing a little better. I know at the top you said they were playing great, and then Monday came and they went to Philadelphia and they fell in the tank. I do love your Seattle Pilots shirt.
Thank you very much.
I love it very much. The 1 year the Brewers were the Seattle Pilots before coming to Milwaukee and bought them out of bankruptcy court. You and I are old enough to remember things like that.
Well, I'm not old enough to remember the Pilots. My first year following baseball was 79, and the Mariners already existed by that point.
Well,
and
what I'm saying is we're old enough to remember some recent history when we were kids, I guess.
Well, I'll tell you, the first time I ever heard of the Pilots is when I was collecting baseball cards, and there was a player who played on the Red Sox in 1980 named Skip Lockwood.
Yes.
And Skip Lockwood was his best years were with the Mets. He was actually a very effective relief pitcher for the Mets in the 1970s. And the Red Sox acquired him to give him some bullpen depth in 1980. Didn't exactly work. And I remember getting his baseball card, and they showed some of the teams he played on. And one of the teams said, Pilots. Pilots. I didn't know what that meant. I've seen some players have Senators on there. And it's like, okay, like Jim Cott played for the Senators. Lenny Randall played for the Senators. So like, okay, all right, that I understand. But what is Pilots? I remember showing it to my mom. My mom was like, maybe it's a minor league team. I said, no, for it's a minor league team, they just say, it'll say like Pawtucket or Rochester or, or Denver, which back when Denver was a minor league team. And so I didn't understand what it was. And it wasn't until about a year or so later I figured out the Pilots were were major league team for 1 year. And please read the book Ball 4 by Jim Bouton if you want to know about the Pilots and their 1 year of existence. Hey, by the way, speaking about teams and stadiums and expansion teams and everything, let's go to yesterday's trivia question. And that was when the Blue Jays played their final game in Exhibition Stadium before they moved to Sky Dome in midseason. Who hit the walk-off home run to end the final ever game at Exhibition Stadium? Now, Scott Horstmeyer, who is a everyday Sully listener, had guessed Junior Felix. That's incorrect. Chuck Freimund, do you want to guess which Blue Jays which Blue Jays slugger hit a home run in 1989 for the final ever Blue Jay game played in Exhibition Stadium?
I will say Tony Fernandez.
You would be wrong. It was George Bell.
Oh, George. Oh, he was such a miserable person to deal with, George Bell, in the locker room. The Jays would come in here when the Brewers in the American League, and he was just awful. Yeah.
Well,
great
he was a great player, though. He was a wonderful player.
He was.
Hey, let's talk a little bit today. You had mentioned, I hinted that the Brewers are playing quite well, and they are. They're 10 games above 500. They just hit a buzzsaw called the Philadelphia Phillies. Hunter Thomas from Locked On Phillies is going to join us tomorrow, actually. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Phillies. But, yeah, I mean, It was Aaron Nola pitched great today. 7 innings of shutout ball. I mean, sometimes you got to tip your cap. What do you think about today's game, which was a 2-0 final? So obviously, it was just the Castellano home run was the only scoring in the entire game. What are your thoughts about today's loss for the Brew Crew?
When Castellanos hit that home run in the 5th inning, Sully, I was like, ball game right there, because I've seen this Brewers team enough in my lifetime when I can predict these guys.
Yeah.
And this series against Philadelphia, they were in a situation where they could not. They scored 2 runs in the series. So I just it was like, they're not scoring off Aaron Nola. And the Phil's got some great pitching, there's no doubt. But the combination of the Phil's great pitching and the Brewers going into one of their patented offensive freezes that we've seen. Brewer fans know this. They're going through this right now. This is their 4th 3-game skid of the season. Each time though, Sully, we think that things are heading south. They quickly turn it around and head back north.
Yeah, I mean, like this was. I mean, you made a great point that this was they scored 2 runs in 3 games against Philadelphia, and yet each game was close. I mean, the Brewers had a 1-0 lead on Tuesday evening in their game against Philadelphia, and that was basically. I mean, someone named Jared Koenig, who I think played Chekhov in Star Trek. Only lasted to the 2nd inning. Was this I didn't know it was happening. If this was an opener situation.
He opened Monday too. He opened both nights, Monday and Tuesday.
Well, there you go. Well, Ray actually did the bulk of the pitching. He was 4 shutout innings there. And Piguero lets up a game-tying homer. And there was a little bit of, oh no, because that was in the 8th inning. I mean, they were getting, you were thinking, wait, maybe they'll win this 1-0. But each one of these games that they played Philadelphia, again, I may be putting lipstick on a pig here right now, but they got swept by Philadelphia, the best team in baseball. But all 3 games were tight games. All 3 games, they pitched well in all 3 games. They let up 3 runs in the first game against that offense. They held them scoreless into the 8th yesterday. Today they only let up a home run in the 5th inning, and that was it. I mean, if you're gonna lose after they basically they beat up Boston, they beat up both Chicago teams, and then boom, you go to Philadelphia and you got hit with a 2x4. But it must be at least a little encouraging that they were able to pitch and make them close ball games.
Well, what the problem here is, the Brewers have so many injuries they're dealing with. And ironically, it's their pitching staff that is banged up. They have 4 starters on the injured list right now. So they're patching. This is the reason.
Did Gasser go on the injured list or yet?
What was that again?
Did Gasser go on yet or no? Gasser.
No,
did Gasser
we're still
go on
trying
the
to.
Injured list?
He's getting a second opinion on that elbow. But there's so many guys. They're preferred starters. There was 4 of them at least who are on the injured list. And then, of course, Devin Williams started the all-star closer in the bullpen, started the year on the injured list. So, but that said, they've been bringing up guys from AAA. They've been just trying to patch things together. And pitching-wise, somehow they're able to figure this out, and they've been just phenomenal pitching-wise. Now, where they've lost games is because they've lost games, low-scoring games where they just can't get out of their own way. You keep thinking the pitching is going to be the problem with this team, Sully, but they keep going out there and having Colin Ray throw the type of effort he had. Bryce Wilson, a one-time middle reliever, do what he did on Monday night. So Ashby today called up from AAA, ran into problems in the 5th inning. So the pitching has actually been real good when we thought that was going to be the issue with the injuries.
Now, when we get back here, we're going to talk about what the real issues are and whether or not there's hope inside their organization. Easy for you to say. Let's hear from our friends over at SupplyHouse.com. You get supplies from the site that's made for skilled trades, SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com is a reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts. I didn't know 200,000 parts existed from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast and into Chicago. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business. And guess what? You can talk to a real person every single time. Pros in the skilled trade can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free TradeMaster program. Every TradeMaster gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. Hey, where are you getting your sports? Where's your hub these days? You should make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed to give you the biggest sports stories out there. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Chuck Freimund of Locked On Brewers is here with us. And yes, the fact that they've had a riddled with injuries in the pitching staff, the pitching was outstanding.
It is
against Philadelphia.
Has been,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's been phenomenal. That's not been the issue with these guys,
which is not what anyone would have thought going into this year, especially after they made the kind of lopsided trade with Baltimore earlier this year in the Burns deal. I think a lot of people thought, oh boy, they're kind of tiptoeing into this year and probably going to sell. But they've been solid. Now, they've not been hitting with a lot of power. A couple of their hitters have been hitting well overall, but there's been some big gaps in their lineup. At this moment, we're recording this. This is going to drop on the 6th day of June. What is the moment? What is the part of the lineup that is the biggest pleasant surprise for you, and what is their biggest disappointment and hole they need to fill?
Bryce Terang at the top of the order, left-handed bat, has been great defensively. We knew how good of a defensive player he was, but he's been great defensively. And this is his second year in the league. He seems to figured it out offensively, I would say. A pleasant surprise. A few others. Christian Yelich looks like to be the Christian Yelich that we all knew several years ago.
Yeah.
Because he went through a couple of bad years there, and you're wondering, who is this guy? But he's back, I think, to being the Christian Yelich that we knew. Contreras has just been unbelievable since getting traded here last year. Sully, he's just been amazing, because we always thought that Wilson was the better of the two Contrerases, and Wilson, unfortunately, is hurt. But maybe it's William, who's just last couple of years has been amazing. So I would say, Yelich and Terang at the top of the order, really and getting on, stealing bases.
Yeah, he has 21 stolen. He has 21 stolen bases so far.
Yeah. He's really been a catalyst, Sully, on this team. So I would say finding a good leadoff hitter, because last year Yelich was in the leadoff spot, but you'd rather have him in the heart of the order. Right. So this with Terang emerging here, did not start the season in the leadoff spot. You got a guy you can put up there. Now the problem is that they won't play him against left-handed pitching. Pat Murphy, the manager, will not play him against left-handed pitching. So when there's a lefty on the mound, then the lineup is all shuffled around a little bit.
Well, then, who's been the biggest letdown for you so far?
Boy, there's Rhys Hoskins was playing well, and then he went on the injured list, and he's struggling a little bit since coming off the injured list last weekend. But Sal Frelick has not built on what he did last year. I think that is. And Blake Perkins in center field had a great 3.5 weeks of the season. And he won a starting job in center field after Garrett Mitchell got hurt. And so Blake Perkins, 3.5 weeks of the season, like, wow, what are they going to do when Garrett Mitchell comes back? And Mitchell's due back later on this month. But since then, we're kind of learning that, well, Blake Perkins is kind of a streaky hitter and maybe not an everyday player every day right now, but we'll see when Mitchell gets back where they are. So I would say center field and right field right now, kind of two holes for me on this team.
Now, let me ask you a question about those two holes. Are those holes that you think you can fill internally, or do you think that you need to make a move?
Well, that's funny. That's exactly what I talked about on my Locked On Brewers podcast yesterday. I said the same thing. I said, well, maybe they need to go out and get themselves a power hitting, left-handed hitting outfielder that's going to play the corner spot in right field. Unless Sal Frelick turns it around, and certainly Sal is part of the future of this team, no doubt about it. But maybe that's what they need to do, is go out and find somebody's right fielder. Maybe not so much a rental, because the Brewers will never do the rental thing. Well, certainly they might do it on an aging veteran that they can get for a song, but they're not just they're not the type to go out and get Pete Alonso and who plays first base. But I'm just using it as an example.
No, I get it.
They're not going to do that. So right field, I would say, if and I'm going to start looking further into the market as teams start selling here, who might be available.
Yeah, you're going to have to take a look at teams. I mean, the White Sox and the Marlins and the Rockies are like the ones that are going to be, trading away players.
Maybe the Mets.
The problem, though, maybe the Mets, but they're a little too close to contention right now.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that some of the outfielders that are available are there's a lot of right-handed hitting outfielders. Someone's going to trade for Tommy Pham because he's a nice sort of he's a plug a hole type player.
Well, check him out. He just had a run in with the Brewers this past weekend.
You know what?
He just had a run-in with the Brewers this past weekend.
Oh, but I don't think he's a candidate for the Brewers anyway, because he's a right-handed power hitter. You need a left-handed one.
Yeah, no left-handed. Yeah.
So no, I think that he's. I don't think that he's the right case, and Luis Robert Jr. is not the right case either. He's. I'm kind of struggling to think of who the right person. Do you go for like a Michael Conforto? Who's, is he even going to be that much of a, that much of an improvement at this point? You could probably get, a Conforto for not a whole lot, even though the Mets are nominally in it. They're clearly not going for it. And I'm just checking that he could be a free agent at the end of the year. So you could probably get him for a hug from Bob Uecker and a bratwurst.
Well, David Stearns, the former GM, is the Mets GM.
Yeah, that's true.
You think that, and they made a trade last year with the Mets before Stearns took over.
Oh wait, man, what am I talking? Conforto's with the Giants now. Conforto's with the Giants. I keep forgetting Conforto's with the Giants.
Yep.
Well, it doesn't matter. The Giants should probably be making a trade too.
They're going to be moving guys too. But as far as the Mets are concerned, I think the Brewers are, there's been rumblings the Mets are going to be trading some of their pitching, maybe Severino or Quintana. They could be doing, but like we talked at the top here, it's just that maybe they don't need the pitching. They need a corner outfield. I think ultimately they're going to probably have to need some pitching. There's only so long they could do by patching this stuff together, Selly. But a nice left-handed stick would be on my wish list. Now, how long you have to wait on something like that? I think there's still a commitment to Sal Frelick. Another thing, Selly, is the Brewers aren't trading any of their top prospects. They got one of the best farm systems in baseball.
No.
They are not willing to trade some of these guys.
And I don't think they should. I think that you're going to see I think you just need to see what club is going to. I mean, Conforto to me is like the
Mhm.
ideal candidate because he is. It won't cost them a top prospect. It won't even cost them a mid-tier prospect.
Yeah.
Just a couple of of maybe if they get like one or two fringe prospects for him, that would be a huge haul. And I'm a big believer in if you have at this point of the year, because this is that stretch of the year, and listeners of my show know I talk about this all the time. This stretch between Memorial Day and the trade deadline is the period of time where you have to patch your holes. Is if you've had a third of the season to look at your team. Now you have this part of the season where you're like, okay, can we fill anything internally or cheaply, and then see what we are at the trade deadline.
Mhm.
And if you know what a problem you have, you're better off trying to patch it early because you don't know if that unheralded trade is going to be just a completely forgotten move, or if it will be like when the Giants acquired Marco Scudero, or like when the Braves acquired Eddie Rosario, where this player gets a new lease on life and suddenly sparks the team. But also you have the team, if you have an issue that need another left-handed bat, get it now so you have that bat for like 2/3 of the season. And remember, and this is written in Gaelic around my family crest, mediocre is better than bad. So if you have something that's bad and you fill it with something adequate, if you have someone who's a negative WAR player and you put in someone who has a 0 WAR, you have now made an improvement.
Well, I wouldn't say the Brewers are bad in right field, but it's been kind of mediocre, maybe just below mediocre play
Mhm.
from Frelick out there. So they could use an upgrade. But I like, they went and got Carlos Santana last year, and they
Yeah.
gave up a song. They gave up a lower tier prospect for him, Santana. But that's the kind of move the Brewers are going to have to make. An
Right.
aging veteran, who's going to be a free agent probably at the end of the season, that's the kind of rental they would get, but they're not renting like an Alonso, like I said earlier. They'd need an aging guy to come in here and, like Mark Hanna was an aging veteran, but he was still a
Right.
serviceable, good guy on the having his team. I was disappointed they didn't bring him back.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk a little bit we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the NL Central in general and recap some things that happened throughout the league. This is an ideal time to be a sports fan. We've got the Stanley Cup Finals all lined up right now. We got the NBA Finals starting tomorrow. It is going to be a fun time because you also got baseball going on all day long. FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, it's America's #1 sportsbook. Hey, this is a reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channel app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local extras of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available at the free Fire TV channel app. Okay. Now we saw that the Pirates wasn't a dynamite performance by Skeens, but it was good enough to get the job done, which is what believe it or not, the Pirates are in line to sweep the LA Dodgers. The Cubs, the White Sox may have won their last game of the year. The Cubs they swept them. It's insane. Tell me what you think. Right now, the Brewers are on top of the National League Central, which when they lost their manager and they lost their ace, a lot of people thought, oh boy, here we go. And it turns out they've rebounded. I guess rebound is the wrong word because they won the division last year, but they certainly adjusted after all those trades. How do you think they're going to fare, and who do you fear the most of this National League Central crowd?
It's funny. Just last week, I put a poll on Twitter. I said, What team do you fear the most in the NL Central? It wasn't the Cincinnati Reds. It wasn't the Pittsburgh Pirates. It wasn't the Chicago Cubs. Wasn't any of those teams. Most of the people said the Milwaukee Brewers are the team that the Milwaukee Brewer fans fear the most, that they are going to do something where they're not going to be able to get out of their own way. Again, they play with fire with this pitching staff here. These guys are on the injured list, some of their better players. And, they go in these deep freezes. So the Brewer fans, I can tell you, people have tweeted at me and said they're worried about the Milwaukee Brewers the most in this division. Me, I just think I've never been able to count out the St. Louis Cardinals, even though, we saw what happened last year. They just never rebounded. Cubs have won 2 in a row. And I know, because where we are in Milwaukee, we can hear Chicago sports talk. And those people look over the fence to us over here in Milwaukee and say, hey, we took their manager, okay, and he made the Brewers better. How come he's not making our team better? We paid Dansby Swanson all this money, and it's Willie Adames who's the best shortstop of the 2 teams. And you can't name 3 guys in the Milwaukee Brewer lineup, and yet they're in first place. That's what Cub fans are saying.
Right.
Cubs have won 2 in a row. Yeah, the White Sox, as you mentioned, they're terrible. But I would think mostly it'd be the Cubs I'd worry about. And they're 5-0.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the one caveat I would have right now is that the Cubs, when they're not, obviously they played the White Sox, but there's something wildly inconsistent about this Cubs team and how they're put together. And right now, lest we forget, the St. Louis Cardinals are only half a game out of a playoff spot right now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's way too much talent on that team. Now, look, they finished in last place last year, and they could completely fall apart. And for the first month or so of the season, this was like, oh my God, is this going to be a 90-loss team? But something has clicked, and maybe sometimes a veteran needs to be, humiliated a little bit or taken down a peg. I would be worried about the Cardinals. Yes, the Reds and the Pirates have a lot of talent on their team, and they're knocking on a playoff spot door at this point too. But I'm not going to completely count out St. Louis.
No, and I caution Brewers fans, when they get off to the 6.5 game lead, don't ever think this division is locked up at this point of the season here in early June. It's down to 5 with the Cubs winning and the Brewers losing. So, yeah, it's down to 5, but as you know, Sully, you've been around baseball long enough, that 5 games can be made up in a whisper.
Oh, yeah.
In a whisper, in a heartbeat. So, I don't put any,
And especially when you look at the injuries that are happening to Milwaukee and the inconsistency of their lineup, that is a Rubik's Cube that could turn into a 6-game slide before you say Cecil Cooper.
One of my all-time favorite Brewers, number 15. You're right. You know what? The Brewers right now are buyers, but nothing surprises me. Who knows? We got about a month and a half away from the trading deadline here, and who knows what could happen between now and then with this team. I'd like to think they're going to be in the race and still in first place.
Yeah.
But you wonder if eventually, because I think, like when I'm on sports talk shows here in Wisconsin, they'll have me on talking, Brewers baseball, representing Locked On Brewers. They'll ask me, Chuck, is this sustainable for the Milwaukee Brewers? I get that question asked a lot. And I every week I'm like, oh man, I think it is. The way they're going, you don't think so, but the way they're going, yes. But as as we always say in baseball, Sully, 162 games, that's the great equalizer in sports, right? Don't you think so?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's why when you had only 4 teams making the postseason altogether, there was a sense that, yes, it could be random, but these are the teams that went through the 162 gauntlet. And with an exception of a year, I could think of like 1 or 2 years where the way the divisions were aligned, it didn't allow for the best teams to make the postseason. But for the most part, when you only had 4 teams in there, you were pretty sure you were going to get 4 quality teams in there. Now you get a wide margin, and I'm not against it. I'm not against the expansion of the playoffs, but I do think a reduction of the games might be needed. I would not be against a 140 game schedule.
Yeah, I don't think they're ever going to do that, though. I just think
no, they're not. No, they'll never do it.
I don't think they're ever. But to your argument, though, look at the Arizona Diamondbacks, who got in as a wild card team last year, had to go on the road, beat Milwaukee in back-to-back games, advanced, beat the Dodgers. Before you know it, they're moving on. They just knocked off Milwaukee and Los Angeles, and things are looking good for them. So, they got hot at the right time in October. That's the one argument about in baseball, where in the NBA, you don't see too many 8th seeds or 9th seeds of those play-in games get to the NBA finals.
No,
but in baseball, it certainly can happen.
Well, yeah, because it's just the pitching staff could go south. You could have a dominant start from someone like that. Yeah, and look at the last bunch of National League teams to win the pennant. When you have a 162 game schedule, I'm not counting 2020 that when LA won, and I'm not taking that away from them. But 2019, you had the Nats, a wild card team. 2021, you had the
Atlanta Braves.
The Atlanta Braves, another team that eliminated the Milwaukee Brewers. Then you had the Philadelphia Phillies, who finished only 1 game ahead of the Milwaukee Brewers. And then last year you had the Diamondbacks, who eliminated the Milwaukee Brewers. And all those teams basically had to go through Milwaukee, wound up going to the World Series.
Yeah. 2019, you mentioned the Nationals. They beat Milwaukee in that 1-game wild card. This is back when they had the wild card.
Yeah.
And the Brewers had a 2-0 lead, a 2-run lead going into the bottom of the 9th inning in that game.
Bottom of the 8th. It was the bottom of the 8th.
Bottom of the 8th.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think the Brewers are a very talented team. You just have to watch out with its injuries that it doesn't collide where the pitching staff gets injured and the lineup goes south. And that could be a bad thing. By the way, I'm going to throw a trivia question. Don't you answer it, Chuck, but it is a Brewers-related trivia question.
Okay.
Who was the first Brewer to win a Gold Glove?
Wow.
He was a player that most people associate with a different team, but he had some great years in Milwaukee, and he was the first ever Brewer to win a Gold Glove. Write the answer down there on YouTube or wherever you're listening to us. Chuck Freimund, tell people where they can listen to your terrific show.
Of course, Locked On Brewers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Google, Spotify, Apple. We're on all those major downloads, wherever you get the great Locked On podcasts. We are there, #1 Brewer podcast out there because of the great Brewer fans out there. And, of course, go to YouTube, search Locked On Brewers, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. That'll alert you every time we drop an episode on Locked On Brewers. And, of course, follow me on Twitter as well, Sully, Chuck Freimund, Freimund.
And follow us on Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Chatting with Chuck Freimund about they're in first place now in early June. Let's see where things end up. I'm yours, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.